Okay. So quick show of hands. How many people are familiar with Qigong? Yay, I like it, an audience like this. Not too many. All right. So my name is Melissa Kerr. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a student of the Dian Arts, which is a martial arts system, more in the internal arts in Qigong. And I have some training in Tai Chi with Lucy Bartimol and the Ohio State University. So Qigong is quite interesting. In the world of martial arts, we have the external arts and the internal arts. The external we tend to see as more forceful. And the internal we might tend to mistakenly think of as more passive and peaceful, right? Or some people might say weak and strong. However we look at it, it's a yang and a yin. It's the polar opposites, and we need both. Just like our body, the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, fight or flight, rest and digest. We need both. Too much of any one thing doesn't give us balance, and our body is designed to be balanced. We're meant to be like a teeter-totter that kind of flows through mid-range, right? But because the body is so amazingly awesome and dynamic, we can take a hard shift. The intent is that we kind of balance it back out. What tends to happen is we take a hard shift and we stay there, or we take these slow, little, progressive shifts. And we don't even recognize how much the body is teetering out of control. And then by the time we turn around and look at things, we're completely imbalanced, and we have no clue where to begin because it's a pile up of stuff. And it tends in our culture particularly, and healthcare, right, that we get into this sympathetic overdrive. So we are imbalanced, not recognizing how we shift back. And there's more and more research, particularly recently, that tells us, the root of all chronic disease seems to be stress-related. And our sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight. It's our stress system. So it's great to have it, and we need it. But we need to control it. We need to not live in that world all of the time. So when we talk about qi, sometimes a word like that can kind of put people on their heels, and they're like, oh, here we go, right? So qi, spelled Qi in Chinese, which is what I'm referencing. It has 65 cultures in the world incorporate the definition of qi, or the concept of qi, into their sciences, into their philosophy, into their culture, except Western medicine. We don't really have a thing that we can correlate to qi. So in Japan, it's Ki. In India, in the Sanskrit terminology, we have prana. So when we talk about yoga, we might be familiar with prana or pranayama. It is, whether it's qi or whether it's prana, it's the life force. And the life force is what moves in us, what moves through us, and what moves around us. So it's not just the breath, the gas exchange in the lungs. And it's not just the circulatory system where we have the blood being pumped through the body and we have another set of exchanges. It's beyond that. And then we start to talk about, here's another word that gets people a little uncomfortable sometimes, if we talk about your bioenergetic field, right? Like, whoa, now we've jumped the shark. We're somewhere where we are way not comfortable here. But we can start to bring that back into, not that we're all quantum physicists, but there's a lot of theoretical framework in quantum physics that makes sense. There's a lot of research, particularly in the last few years, that might not be our strongest research, which doesn't mean it's not valuable. But we're getting more research that says, okay, so we understand medical devices and the energies that they emit. We use ultrasound to diagnose or to treat. We use MRIs and CTs, and we get how biofeedback machines work. But if you go to start to talk about the energy in your hands, Here we go again, right? So infrared energy, infrared heat, however we want to term it, but the energy that can come out of our hands, there's research that shows Qigong practitioners can emit this infrared energy. And we can facilitate Qi or we can inhibit Qi. So now we're getting a little Star Wars-esque here, right? But we can capture that with some imaging techniques. And this is a discussion, a much larger discussion that we can be had when we talk about getting into more of the science behind how this works. But we are taking, Qigong is all very intentional hand placement that stimulates acupoints. Okay? Acupoints exist. We have Western research that correlates with Eastern findings that say, here are these particular points in the body. We may call them trigger points, or we may call them all these other things, but they line up to basically say the same thing in a different language. And we can also show through some imaging that when we line up pressure points, or if we place our hands strategically over these points, the biomagnetic or the electromagnetic fields increase. There's an increase in stimulation at acupressure points when we do X, Y, or Z. Sometimes we use a needle. Sometimes we use pressure, acupuncture, acupressure. Sometimes we use no contact hand placement, but we're lining up these points. We're taking this radiant energy and we're stimulating these areas. So Qigong, every placement of our hands is intentional to line up pressure points, which then tries to help us balance the meridians. We don't have a direct meridian concept in Western medicine, but we have nerve distribution, right? Circulatory distribution. When we look at the central channel in meridians, we have the equivalents of our spinal cord and our structural vertebral bodies. So there's a lot of overlap and parallels. So everything we're doing with the movement of our hands is lining up pressure points to stimulate these acupoints. So why do we want to stimulate the acupoints? Well, the body is predominantly water. And if we think of our body as a vessel, as a waterway, what happens when we take a body of water that's flowing and we place a dam in there? We stop the water. Things back up. If we look at a pond that has a fountain in it, when the fountain's running, things are nice. They're clear, they're lovely. When the fountain stops running and things sit and it gets stagnant, we can start to see junk collecting. Let's take that concept and put it into our body. We know what happens when we go into congestive heart failure and the heart isn't pumping out this volume, and then things back up, and the backup goes into this system and that system, and then we see all the swelling and. Well, when our acupoints get blocked, things can't flow, Qi can't flow, water can't flow, and things back up. When things back up, they pile up. When things pile up, guess what happens in our body? We get caught up in the sympathetic overdrive. We don't want that. So now let's bring it into healthcare. You know what it's like when you're around someone and you feel like they are just a heavy, heavy weight that's hanging on your shoulder, right? Gosh, I don't want to go in there and do this. I don't want to have to be confronted with this person or have this conversation. And we start to go, I know where it's going to go, and we have this because there's a habit or an experience. But you know what it's like to be around somebody who has just negative energy. And that energy can stick to you, whether you've asked it to stick to you or not. And if you think about how many people through the course of the day may all be just adding their little bits and pieces to you, and then you take that home. And then you're letting all of that just spread around, or we're not in a great mental state to even be nice to the people that we're closest to, right? So let's take some of these Qigong practices and think about how we can wipe our slate, how we can clean our, whatever you want to call it. You want to clean your aura? That's cool. You want to clean your personal space? That's great. If you're like, I'm going along for the ride, I'll see what happens, that's great. Let's not have an expectation, but let's see what we can do when we take our intention and place it, boom, right here and now with us, because the energy goes where your intention flows. So if your intention is on your list of things to do when you leave here, that's where your energy is going. And if your intention with that patient is, I can't wait to get out of here, that's where your energy is going, right? So let's think about how we want to utilize our energy, protect our personal space, make sure we're very aware of what we invite into it. And when things come along for the ride that we haven't asked for, we clear it. It keeps us balanced. It keeps us healthy. It keeps us back to this wonderful fluctuation where we should be. Not having a good day, that's all right, it'll balance. This is not so great, this is just a back and a forth, so we don't start to edge or get that boom. Because everything is energy, and energy will eventually find a balance. And we really don't want to be going around in our world with these high highs and these low lows, right? So let's find that middle ground.